In this video demonstration, we're going to be taking a look at creating a custom rhinestone design here inside Coreldraw. Now for this demonstration, I'm going to be using Coreldraw X6 with our EasyStone macro. Now EasyStone is a free software, it doesn't cost anything, but there is a bit of a catch. And the catch is that EasyStone was developed eons ago, before the 64-bit version of Coreldraw ever existed, back in the Windows 32-bit days. So back in the dinosaur ages. So here's what the point is. You have to have the 32-bit version of Coreldraw in order to use EasyStone. Now there is no benefit to us to use the 64-bit version of Coreldraw when we're creating rhinestone designs. It's just as fast to do it here in the 32-bit version as it would be your 64-bit version. You can install both the 32-bit and 64-bit versions of Coreldraw on your Windows 64-bit machine, so that's not an issue either. Of course, my new laptop is a Windows 64-bit, but because it works, it's not an issue for me. I've never bothered to do the necessary programming to make it work with the 64-bit version. So there you have it. It does work with Coreldraw X4 all the way up to the very latest version. You can go to easystonetemplates.com to download it. The problem is the support is sketchy. When you're talking about free software, I may answer your question, I may not. But fortunately, we have a YouTube channel. It has hundreds of videos, and there's a little search box. And most of the problems that you might encounter are probably covered in a video somewhere. In today's world, probably the most similar software to EasyStone would be the TRW Stone Wizard. Now, EasyStone existed many years before the Stone Wizard was ever dreamt up, but you'll see a lot of the same type of functionality in between the two programs. There's also a rhinestone software macro with by Synergy 17, and then there's also a rhinestone macro by the Digital Art Solutions. As far as I know, EasyStone is one of, if not the only, free rhinestone macro for Coreldraw. I created EasyStone for the purpose of me using it, so I didn't create it for the purpose of selling it. What you're going to find in this video demonstration, I hope, is you're going to learn something that is not being showed out there in the marketplace right now. And let's go ahead and import the design that we're going to be doing today. It's right here. And there you go. Demand that this type of design is demonstrated in your software. I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to that have bought these other rhinestone macros out there in the marketplace, and they haven't a clue how to use them. And the fact of the matter is, I know there's hundreds of videos on the TRW Stone Wizard. Hundreds. There's all kinds of videos. How could you not possibly know how to use it? Well, part of that reason is because they just don't show what I would consider real world scenarios. So here's a case of a logo that's really simple to do, but I don't think you would ever see it demonstrated in any other design software the way I'm going to demonstrate it to you. And as you watch our videos, you begin to learn more and more and more. Now, I've done thousands of designs, so I kind of have a nice bag of tricks. I kind of know what I'm doing. And I come at it from the perspective that I want the best quality design. Yes, I want to create it quickly. That would be a bonus. But I wouldn't care if I spent 6 hours on a design. If it came out absolutely badass, that's what I'm after. I want badass. And what makes a badass design? Well, it's got to be visually appealing, and the stone spacing has got to be spot on. That, to me, is an absolute killer. If you look at some of the designs out there in the marketplace, the stone spacing is all over the place. It's just not perfect. And the other thing that bugs me is when you have a symmetrical design, and I see it so many times, and I kind of chuckle inside because it's like, if you have a symmetrical design, Why then would the stones on the right be different than the stones on the left if it's literally supposed to be symmetrical? And that's just poor design. So we're going to create half of the design and we're going to mirror it, and then we'll create the other half. Now that's using your brain. But I see it a lot. I see symmetrical designs that are different on left and right, even though they're supposed to be symmetrical. Now, if we look at this design, what do you see? What do you see? What's the first thing that catches your eye? Boom, symmetry. The left is the same as the right, but you say, oh, Kevin, it's not the same. But you're going to find out very quickly it is the same. So, a little bit of background on myself. I am a trained architect. That's what I went to school for, was architecture. So when I look at things, I probably look at things a lot differently than most people do. And yes, I do see symmetry here. I do see that the left is the same as the right, even though most people would say, no, the left side of the design is not the same as the right. But you'll find out soon enough it really is, mostly. So, but we're going to use that to our advantage as far as the left and right is concerned. We're going to use that to our advantage and not have to spend a lot of time creating this design. Okay, so first things first, we need to set our design size. And the first thing I'm going to do is select our design and come over here to our specialty tab and hit set size. And I'm going to select the left side of the L and the right side of my H and change it to 10 inches. Roughly, approximately, it's now approximately 10 inches wide. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose lock object. Now the other thing that you're going to see in this video demonstration, and I'm going to try and kind of explain it to you and show you a little bit more in depth, because it's really important. If you're starting to learn rhinestone design, do it the right way to begin with, and it'll save you a lot of work. All right. Now, what I'm about to tell you is going against what everyone else probably in the entire world is going to tell you. Rhinestone software is meant to take a vector object and convert it into a rhinestone design. You don't want to do that. And I know that doesn't sound right, but you do not want to use vector objects for rhinestone design. It's too complicated. It's unnecessary. The results that you get with your rhinestone software probably aren't even going to be very good. And you have to go back and quote unquote touch it up. No. No, 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 no. Especially any design with any type of complexity. This design has a little bit of complexity because look at all these wild angles. If you've done any type of rhinestone design work, you know that all these angles, that's going to make your mind go crazy. But not the way we're going to design it. So, if you watch some of our other video demonstrations, we deliberately take complicated artwork and show you how to recreate it with rhinestone designs, with rhinestones, but we're not going to be using the vector geometry in order to do it. And I'll explain here. Let me just give you an example, okay? So, first example, we're going to draw a line, and then we're going to draw a circle, just to give you a basic, real basic. So all rhinestone software, it doesn't matter if you're using a Coreldraw macro or a standalone rhinestone software, all rhinestone software works essentially on the same premise. So we have a line that is a given dimension. We've told the software what size stone we want to use. We've told the software what size spacing we want to use. And then we're going to add stones to it and blah. There it goes. So what did it do? Well, it instantly determined the length of our selected object. It figured out, based on that length and the spacing and the stone size, how many stones could fit and keep at least a 0.5 millimeter spacing. And boom, it made all those calculations instantaneously, and boom, it added that number of stones to that geometry. If we have a circle and we add stones to it, boom, then we've changed our stone size to SS16. So it uses the size of an SS16 stone, the 0.5 millimeter at least. It determined what the circumference of the circle was, made the mathematical calculation, and determined that this amount of stones can fit on there and maintain that 0.5 millimeter spacing. Well, ain't that fantastic? And it is. I mean, that is actually quite beneficial. So let's take a look at our text here. So we are using a bitmap. We're not using vectors. One of the things that when you first begin a design is you have to determine, well, what size rhinestones are we going to be using? And how do those size of rhinestones correlate to the details in our design? So for this design, we're going to be using 6s, 10s, and 16s. And why do I do that? Well, because I want to show you some cool stuff inside EasyStone. And also because when we're using multiple rhinestone sizes, it creates visual interest in the design, and it's badass. This design will look way better with more than one stone size than it would be if everything was the same. The other thing to keep in mind, for those of you who are in this business, the other thing to keep in mind is if you look at our designs on easystonetemplates.com, you'll see that most of our designs use multiple stone sizes because I like the way it looks. Yes, it's more complicated, but not significantly more complicated if you know what you're doing. That's the catch. But the other reason I wanted to point this out in this particular design, the reason we're going to use multiple stone sizes is because rhinestone designs, we don't just have to use rhinestones. The reason that I use more stone sizes than most people is because I don't do rhinestones. I know that may sound confusing, but I don't do rhinestones. But I do have a spangle machine, okay? And so a spangle machine, the way the punches are set up in the machine, we can very easily use multiple size spangles in a design. And I think it looks better. And so because most of my designs are kind of geared toward being run through my spangle machine versus being done in rhinestones, that's probably why I have more designs with multiple stone sizes, because I'm using those with my spangle machine. So there's that. But even if you don't have a spangle machine, if you want to create this design that we're about to create in holographic film, then the same rule applies. You can get the different size circles of the design, and it gives a visual interest, and then you don't have to worry about having all the different stone sizes, or have to worry about brushing in the different stone sizes into a template and so forth. So if you like a design but you don't like the multiple stone sizes because either you don't have the stones in the various different sizes, or you just don't want to take the extra work of making the rhinestone transfer with different stone sizes, just cut it out in holographic vinyl and it'll look badass, and you'll be able to utilize that design. So let's go ahead and begin our work. The first thing we need to do is we need to set some stones down. So I am going to set a 6 size stone down, ding, and a 10 down, ding, and a 16 down, ding, and escape. So those are my 3 stone sizes. So now I can visually see, well, this is a 16 here, this is a 10, this is a 6. I can visually get a clue as to how the rhinestone is going to correlate to my artwork. For example, I could do maybe 2 stones wide for my outline. I could just get an idea of what I'm going to do here. I already know what I'm going to do, but I'm just giving you an example. So let's take our 10 and bring it over here to our L. And what do we see here? Well, we see that if we had 2 stones, that would more or less fill up our letter L. Now, if this was a vector L, and we were asking the software to convert this into rhinestones, this is essentially what the software would do. The software would say, okay, well, we have a vector outline there, and we have a vector outline here, and this is what we have in the middle. And so it would say, for our letter L, it would create 3 stone widths wide. But what it would do is you would have this spacing. And obviously the reason you have that spacing is because that's all you can have. We can't fit another stone in there, but I don't like that wide spacing. I don't like that. So that's why we take control when we're doing our design work. We don't have to, it's just as easy for me to take control and say, no, that's not actually what I want. And that's why I don't use vectors. So all we're going to do here is we're going to offset this stone, and we're offsetting it exactly a half a millimeter, a half a millimeter, a half a millimeter, a half a millimeter. That's what we're doing. Okay? And then we're going to take it and offset it going the other way too. And then we're going to take these and we're going to offset them. And there you go. So you can see there was nothing complicated about that. A couple little offsets. But what we gain is we gain the fact that these stones are exactly a half a millimeter apart all the way across the board. Okay? So now let's go ahead and slide these over for our letter E. And all we have to do, of course, is select some stones and offset a couple stones here. And then in the middle of our E, we've got issues, people. Don't we? We got issues. And the issue is that we're all about symmetry. And there's 2 stones at the bottom and 3 stones at the top. And we need to move this row of stones. We need to nudge it up. But we don't want to do it just by eye. Now, if you're really good, yes, you could probably center it up close enough, but I have OCD. I would spot it in a second. And so we have functionality here in Easy Stone that takes care of this for us. So we need to nudge it up half the distance of a stone. We don't know exactly how much that is. There's no easy way to do it in Coreldraw, so we created the function here in Easy Stone. So back over here at Offset, when we hover over these buttons, if you look down here at the very bottom of the macro, it says offset up. Alt key will nudge it up, and the Alt and Control key will nudge it up half of the offset distance. Wow, ain't that fancy? So Alt Control and nudge it up, ba-ding, and now you can see that that is absolutely perfectly centered, top to bottom between the spaces, and there you go. So perfect. All right. So now, anytime that we run into work, when we have angles, boy, we hate angles when we're doing rhinestone design. So in the Z and the A, we've got issues. It's going to take some time. We've got these angles to contend with. I'm going to show you how we do it, but it's going to take work, and I don't like to work. So I'm going to avoid it like the plague as long as I can. So we'll move it over here to our letter H and go ahead and knock it out. So let's go ahead and delete those stones that we don't need for our H and these stones that we don't need for our H. I am going to take a set of stones and actually I think I'm just going to do those 4, nudge them over. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need the vertical on the right to be exactly the same as it is on the left. Well, how do I do that? Well, the easiest way to do that is by using anchor stones. So we're going to select a group of stones here on the left that we want to replicate. And you can see here we've got these 2 stones here. Those become our anchors. So we're going to flip it horizontally, and then we're going to pick it up from the center of that stone and move it to the center of this one. And there you go. Now the problem is you can see now that based on the geometry, our letter H is a little bit wider than the original, and I don't want that. So I'm going to nudge it over 1 more using that anchor, and then I can go ahead and delete these manually if I want to. And so now, yes, our H is slightly less wide than the original artwork, but if we were to push it to the same width, then these stones in the middle would have a wider spacing. And I have OCD, and I would prefer that all those stones to be exactly a half a millimeter if that's possible. And in this case, it's possible, so we're going to leave it that way. All right, let's move on to our letter A. We're going to move these 2 stones at the top over. Make a duplicate of those. And then we're going to move these 2 stones at the bottom and slide them over. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this stone and have Easy Stone figure out what's in between. There we go. So that's taken care of. Now we need to, again, do kind of like we did with our H, is we need that same geometry. So we're going to go ahead and take all of those stones and flip them over. Using that anchor, we're going to go from that stone to that stone. But look at here. We have a conflict. Now I know that if we were to cut this template just the way it is, even though we have a conflict of stones there, it would be fine. The template would be fine. It would go ahead and create those create the template just fine and the transfer just fine. So at any rate, when you do have conflicts, I wouldn't stress over it too much. It's not really going to be an issue, but we'll go ahead and spread those out. Now you can see that the space between those stones is very little, but it would still cut just fine. Your template won't tear, nothing. It'll be fine. But sometimes those are some of the sacrifices that we have to make, just because of that's all it's going to fit. At the end of the day, that's all it's going to fit in there. So there we go. So now our letter A is now complete. And we can move on to the letter Z. So we're going to use some of the geometry from E. And you could see here, first off, that we are going to create one more stone. Now, if you look at the top here, there's 2 rows of stones, and then we have this kind of detail right here. So what I'm going to do down here at the bottom is I'm just going to slide this stone over to kind of replicate that detail a little bit. It's not really going to look quite right. It's not going to be that noticeable, but we tried. I'm going to space all the remaining stones apart a little bit more. And now I want to copy this geometry exactly to the top. So we're going to make a duplicate, flip it horizontally and vertically. But now how do I get that to the very top of my E? Well, the way we do that is group all them stones, hold our shift key, select one of these stones here on our E and hit T for top. And now you can see all those are lined up exactly to the top like they should be. Now we just need to connect the dots. Like such and like such. And there we go. That takes care of that. Okay, so now if we take our text and just slide it on down here, and we throw a weed box around it, ta-da! You can see it looks great. We know that the spacing is nearly a 1/2 millimeter all the way across the board, or really, really close to it. And that's ultimately what we need and want, okay? Now the fun part begins. This is where we got to put our thinking caps on, and this is why when you're in school, you should not skip geometry class. Because we're going to be using a bit of geometry. Now, what is the first thing that you see in this design? Well, this appears to be an equilateral triangle. And of course, what that means is that all 3 sides are equal, and that will actually help us in our design work. So, as best as I can tell, I honestly still cannot believe it, but as best as I can tell, there is no way to create an equilateral triangle in Coreldraw, which I swear I don't believe it. I just don't. There's a basic shape tool here where we create triangles and circles and stuff. And if you look here under basic shapes, and then up here is where you change your shapes. So we have circles and hearts and lightning bolts. And there's triangles, but there's no equilateral triangle. So I don't know how you create an equilateral triangle in Coreldraw. If there's an equilateral triangle function in Coreldraw, I don't know where it is. But luckily I know how to create an equilateral triangle, so it don't really matter. So anyhow, that's what we're going to do. We're going to create an equilateral triangle. And the reason we're going to take the time to create an equilateral triangle is because it'll help us with our design work, and you'll see that here in a minute. So at any rate, we just going to draw a line, horizontal line, boom. And you can see I've kind of used the artwork, the original artwork as kind of a guide. And now I'm going to move this over here. So equilateral triangle, we know that every side's the same. So let's make a duplicate. And if we know anything about geometry and equilateral triangles, we know that the angle between lines is always going to be 60 degrees on an equilateral triangle. So we'll rotate the design 60 degrees. And then we'll go ahead and place that line, boop, right there. And then we'll just mirror it over. And there you go. You can see, boop, there you go. There's your equilateral triangle. Okay? Now, there's a function inside Coreldraw called contouring. And in EasyStone, we don't use that word because the more familiar word would be offsetting. They're basically the same thing. But in order to offset or contour, we need a solid object. And these 3 lines are not obviously a solid object. So we're going to use the Smart Fill function here in Coreldraw to create us a solid object. We had the boundary with the lines, and then we use Smart Fill to create an actual object. Okay. So now we have an object. For my border of this design, I want my border to be 6s and 16s. So this orange line here, I want to be stone that in 6s, but just to the outside of that, I want 16s. So I don't know what that offset should be. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button on the stone fill tab, this little blue box, and we have a function that we can go from 6 to 16. If we right click, it's going to offset to the outside. So what the software is doing for us, it's taking the diameter of an SS6 stone, the diameter of an SS16 stone, the spacing of a 0.5 millimeter, and it's doing all these calculations and determining how much that offset should be. And there you go. So when we right click, now we have a new path to the outside. And so if we stone the inside path, if we go to wireframe mode, you'll see it's just a path. But it'll stone the inside path at 6s, it'll stone the outsides at 16. The end result should be, there should be a 0.5 millimeter spacing between those two stones. Now, if we go back to the original design, there's a white space. Okay, so we need to create another path for the white space. So to do that, we're just going to do 6s. We're going to do a spacing of an SS6 stone, and we're going to do one offset to the inside. That's why we use the island fill function. And so now we have a new path. If we go to wireframe mode, you can see we have boom, 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 3 paths. That's what we need. So now we need to create the path for the L and the H function. And so what we need to do now is we need to go back to our magic function, and we need to go 6 and 10s. We're going to left click to offset to the inside before we right click to offset to the outside. And so now you can see we have yet another path inside. So to simplify matters, we're going to go ahead and delete the white space path because we're not going to put any stones there. And let's go ahead and add some stones. Okay. So we're going to start off by adding 6s. Then we're going to add 16s. And ta-da! There's our 6s and 16s, and look at that spacing. Isn't that glorious? It's exactly what we need. All right, so now I'm going to change my stone color, and we're going to stone those with 10s. And there you go. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to come in here and delete all of this nonsense. We are going to check for overlapping stones. It did find some, so we'll go ahead and dispose of those. And now we don't have any overlapping stones. And there we have the base of our geometry here. Now comes the fun part. What we're going to do is we're going to take this line and this line of stones. So we take those two stones, and we're going to just make some copies. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Da-da. There we go. And just to kind of simplify this process, we're going to come in here and we're going to delete this half. And we're just going to mirror this. You'll see why. Like, what is this madman doing? You'll see. You'll see. You'll see. You'll be like, whoa, man, that's awesome. All right. So now you can see what we've created. We've got the part of our L on the left. We've got the part of the H on the right. And how are we going to go about creating that white space? So we're going to select those stones and hit delete. And I'm going to do it one more time. I want 2 rows. So now if we go back to the original design, you see that's that white space that we created. You see it coming alive? Isn't that wonderful? All right. So now what we don't know is we don't know exactly where this H is hitting in the grand scheme of things. So let's just take what we've created here and more or less line it up. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just we're eyeballing it at this point. And you could see that our what we created isn't exactly our original artwork. But it doesn't need to be exact. It just needs to be representative. If we were strictly using the vectors, if this was all done in vectors, and then we were using the software to convert the vectors, then the software is going to be constrained to using exactly what we had. And sometimes when we use exactly what we had, overcomplicates it. It says, how do I fit all these stones in this little space? This way we don't have to do that. We took control. We're making a couple of basic calculations, and life is good. And we'll have an excellent looking design in the end, okay? So that's really what we're after. All right, so now that we have that roughly positioned, we can get an idea of roughly, I'm just going to select this stone and give it a different color. And what that will do is that will help me specify where that horizontal line is supposed to be. And then here, I could just come in here and delete. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Boom. So we know that this one and this one, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. All right. So now we don't need those. Get rid of them. And now we have a pretty good idea of where all of our geometry needs to sit. So now I'm going to pull it back away from there so we don't overcomplicate our life. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to select some stones. I am going to, let's see what I want to do here. Let me give these a different color. Oops. I just going to help us visually. I wouldn't actually do this. Well, I might actually do this in our design work too, but I just want to try and help you visually be able to see what we're doing. So we're going to take that first line of stones there and copy it over to these anchor points that we made over here. So we're going to go from the center to center, and then spacebar, 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 spacebar. Okay? So that will, but you see here we've got 2 lines of stones we need to get rid of. So let's do that quick. We'll delete those, and we will delete that row. So that creates our white space. Now we need to get rid of all these pink stones. So we're going to mark those, and we're going to select them with our freehand selection tool here in Coreldraw. And we're just going to pick up all those pink stones and dispose of them. Okay? So that takes care of that. So now we have the same issue here is we need to create the bottom of our L. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Copy those over like so. Okay. And then all we need to do is connect the dots here. So we're going to go from there to there. We're going to go from here to here. And here to here. Here to here. Here to here. And here to here. Okay. So now that's all taken care of. Now what we need to do is we need to create the horizontal part of our H. And basically all I'm going to do is kind of eyeball where it should be. If I really wanted to, I could draw, this might be just a fun exercise. Let's go ahead and just draw a big old box. Okay. I'm going to click on the box, and that will allow me to rotate the box. And this point here, I can specify the rotation position, and then I can rotate however much I want. So if I want to rotate, for example, 45, you could see I would rotate like that. But what I want to do is I want to grab the edge of the design, and so that is, boom, right there. So we know that this stone right here is the 2 stones that we're looking to connect. That's basically my point. Boom. Okay. And I probably would have just eyeballed it, but if you want to be able to determine exactly what it was supposed to be, that's the way you would do it. Okay. I'm going to mark some stones. I'm going to select all of these and say yes. We'll go ahead and break my blend. And then what we have to do, of course, is we have to do 7 rows. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. If we go into wireframe mode here, you'll see that there's a path that we're creating when we're adding stones between 2 lines. And so we're just going to dispose of them paths. We've got a function there, an easy stone that takes care of that. So there you go. Now you have all that horizontal spacing the way you needed it. So now we have a completed design. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our L and H and group it together. And then this, we're going to group it together. We're going to take both of these elements and center them up to one another. Position this where we need it, like such. And we're going to go ahead and add a weed box. And we do have overlapping stones, we know that. So we're going to go ahead and dispose of those. 40 of them, oh my goodness. So now we don't have any overlapping stones. And you can see we have a really attractive design. We took control of the geometry. To me, honestly, that's the only way I would know to do this design. To try and convert, if this was provided to us in vector format, to try and have converted it somehow, some way, and to get this end result, I don't think you would have done it very easily. So this way we just have a bit more perfection to it. So that's it. That in a nutshell. So I know it's complicated, but the reality of it is once you really understand what you're doing, you can kick out designs pretty quick. If I had to guess how long this design would take, start to finish, it would probably take me a half hour, 45 minutes. If I wasn't sitting here trying to explain it to you, it would probably take about a half hour, 45 minutes to do the design. So not a lot of time, really, and the end result would be a nice quality looking design. So I hope you learned something, and these techniques can be applied to the other rhinestone macros you might already have that you purchased. So it's just a different thought process, basically. So hopefully you learned something and can utilize that in your design work. Thanks for watching.